Hi, I've been wanting to uh tell you guys this for a while, and I was planning to do it in Bendy and the Dark Revival number 4, but I was like that, and then but I looked on where I was gonna release that, and I was like, that's too far down the line. I'm gonna bump it up to a. I was initially gonna try to put this in like maybe one video or another video. But now that I actually think about it, it might just be better if I just release it as its own video. So that's what I'm gonna do. Anyway, I want to share my Deltarune knight theory, like who the knight is. And the reason why I'm not like talking about this in like Undertale or something like that is because I finished Undertale, and the reason why I'm not talking about it in Deltarune is because, like I've said before, I want to play Deltarune when it's finished, like when all 7 chapters are out, just to kind of just experience it in one go. But yeah, I've been watching Mr.BrickAndCo. I've been watching their videos a lot recently, and it's kind of gotten my brain like on this Deltarune, like who the knight is and everything again, because like when chapter 3 and 4 came out, I was like, oh, this is cool, and then everyone was like oh my god, it's the knight, and then that whole started, and then it kind of died down. But for me personally, I just didn't have, like, I was just bouncing between a lot of stuff, and so I didn't really have time to focus on Deltarune. But now that I have some downtime, I can actually focus on Deltarune. So like I said, I'm gonna share who I think the knight is, and also what Ralsei is, because this just recently jumped into my head, and I was like, oh, that would make sense, because it kind of makes sense. Just because, like, a lot of stuff, like, just kind of lines up with how I'm thinking about it. Anyway, so for the actual Deltarune, who the knight is, I do ultimately think it's Des. I do think Des is the knight, and I'm gonna go on, like, a whole tangent and spiel about it, but, so I did not know who Des was before watching Mr.BrickAndCo's video about everything you missed before chapters 3 and 4, Deltarune lore 101, and then explaining all the insane lore in the new Deltarune ARG. I did not know Des before that. But now that I know Des, I'm like, oh, it has to be Des. And like a lot of like Deltarune theorists that I'm seeing are also kind of leaning that way, but they're kind of forgetting something like really valuable to Des that I'm like, why have we forgotten about this? Like, so a huge thing is Des is missing, right? But Des doesn't know where they are. So Mr.BrickAndCo, and I'm gonna like reference Mr.BrickAndCo a lot, because like that's how I found out about Des, and they're like my Deltarune. They're the one that I'm like going to Deltarune for, and like all that stuff. Anyway, they pointed out that they're somewhere and they don't know where they are, and Des is confused about where they are. So kind of have that in the back of your mind, because what I'm about to, because I need to say this next thing, because I need to say that and this next thing to kind of really combine the two for why I think Des is the knight. Creating, or basically ever since like chapter 2, how Ralsei described how you need to create a dark world, it's just been stuck in the back of my mind. Where, because I've only played chapter 1 when chapter 1 came out. Ever since then, I've just watched stuff, because I was just like waiting for chapter 1 from chapter 2. I was like, I'm not gonna play this just because like it took so long, and I know myself that I'm just gonna want to take more stuff. Like, I want to consume more Deltarune stuff. So that's also why I'm waiting, just because like I know I'm going to want more. Anyway, back in Deltarune chapter 2, Ralsei said you need to strike the earth with a very sharp object and pour something. I'm sure Future Me has it on screen. But ever since then, I thought of this like immediately. I was like, what if you didn't strike the earth? What if you struck something else? So what I think is Des is the knight because someone struck Des and made them into, like, a dark world, or, like, a darkener type of thing. Basically, they struck them as if they were going to create a dark world. And that's how Des became the knight. And, like, Des doesn't know where they are because you just got, like, stabbed with something. So you're gonna be like, what the fuck? It makes sense to me. It very much makes sense to me. I really, like, it just... I'm about to, like, say more stuff to, like, give kind of evidence, and but I know that just sounds really weird and off the wall. But to me, this theory makes sense. Also, who I think struck Des to make them the knight was Gaster. Because Gaster be gastering and just being an evil scientist, basically. Like, he's not evil, but he's doing evil scientist shit. But like, I think, like, because, like Mr.BrickAndCo said, like, in one of their chapter 3 and 4 videos, they kind of think... One of them thinks that Gaster kind of found out a way to make dark worlds. So naturally, kind of like, and obviously, like, I think Gaster would have the same thought process as me, like I did once I heard, like, strike the earth. What if you don't have to strike the earth? Like, what if you could, like, strike someone or something? So I feel like that would be why he, like, struck Des. And I have two ways of I have two, like, avenues, two like branching paths on this theory of, like, how and why Des is the knight as well, other than, like, that, like, to get, like, into more detail. One has a lot more evidence, and just, like, my, like, what I've observed and stuff through chapters 3 and 4. But anyway, I'll say both, and I'll say which one I kind of believe more, and the one I believe more is the one that has more evidence. I don't really know, and I'm also just, like, spouting this off the top of my head. Like, I haven't written all this down, I haven't, like, figured it out. I'm just, like, this has all been in my head, and I'm getting it out now. So, one of the ways I think why Gaster made Des the Knight is obviously the code of Toriel, Undyne, and a holiday. And I've worded that very carefully because that is part of why I'm wording it how I am, and how this theory goes. This part of the theory goes is I feel like Gaster found this prophecy and was like, and found this code, and, like, it just feels weird to have a code saying, like, the Deltarune, like, having it call out basically Toriel, Undyne, and the mayor. It feels very weird for that to happen. So I feel like so ultimately, kind of just skipping over, because I don't really know how else to word it other than just to say it type thing. I feel like Gaster is wanting 3 knights, and is wanting the knights to be the mayor, Toriel, and Undyne, because of that code on the bunker somehow. I don't know how that is important, but it just feels really, really strange and really, really weird that it's those 3 for some reason. And what's also weird is that in chapter 4, when Gaster or Carol is calling Chris on the phone, they say, I believe they say something along this line of we are sacrificing Undyne next week. As soon as I saw that, I was very much like, what are you sacrificing Undyne for? Why are you sacrificing who? Like, what? Like, why? Like, that sentence really stuck out to me. And then I thought, as I was, like, trying to, like, wrap my head around it, I was like, oh, this could be more evidence to Des being struck and turned into, like, a darkener or dark world. And this also could, like, expand on the, like, why Toriel, Undyne, and the mayor are all important to the bunker and or Gaster somehow. So it seems like he doesn't want... So to me, it seems like Undyne is going to become like the knight. There is going to be another night that is going to look like Undyne. Why it's next week, I don't know. Maybe something goes down in, like... Because I know Chapter 5 is going to be the festival. So maybe something, like, happens where, like, the festival happens and, like, Susie and Chris are expecting this big disaster to happen because of the roaring and everything like that, but it doesn't happen, so they're kind of like, okay, we're still going to be on guard, but we're going to enjoy our lives. And then somehow Gaster kidnaps Toriel and makes all 3 nights. It feels right, but also like I'm grasping. It feels like I'm on the right track, but I'm also grasping at like straws, and like this theory is not there, but like it makes sense to me, and I'm just sharing it because I'm like, this is interesting, and this is how my mind works. Anyway, so originally I worded it Toriel, Undyne, and a holiday. How I think. Why I think it's Des, and why I say a holiday and not the mayor, is because I think Gaster was going to kidnap the mayor, but somehow Carol just found out and then bargained with Gaster, and Gaster was like, fuck it, if it works, it works. So, because Carol doesn't seem like she really loves her kid. Carol to me seems like she, what's her name? Amity's mom. Odalia. Carol gives Odalia vibes to me. Like, she very much is Odalia from the Owl House. So it doesn't feel like she really loves her kids and or her husband type of thing. She's just like, yeah, fine, whatever. If this is what I have to have in order for power, then I will do it just because I want power. That's the vibe Carol gives off to me. So I feel like Carol nearly got kidnapped, but then bargained Des for her life. And I also, like, more evidence to me saying, like, why she's, like, an Odalia and why she bargained for her life is very much of, like, how Noelle responded when God, I'm very much blanking on everything. God, when Susie had Des's guitar, it could seem like Noelle is the scapegoat, which would be kind of funny because instead of a goat, she's a deer and she's a scape deer. I don't know. And Des could be like the golden child, but like that wouldn't really work with my theory. So I'm just kind of saying like, no, she doesn't love her kids, but I don't know. Anyway, it just really struck me like, oh, Carol is a bitch and does not treat Noelle right, because that is very much a fear-based response. Like, yes, it is a fear-based response, but it's also very much an abusive response. Like, that is, like, she was, like, tunnel visioned on, it was me, I'm the one to blame, blah, 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 blah. It didn't sit right with me that, like, yeah, she might be a bad mom, but this was not just, she's a bad mom. Like, it goes to, like, to me, that scene really, like, was like, no, Carol is abusive. And that would kind of make sense, because if the Dreamer family really cares about Chris and Asriel, like, it seems like both Toriel and Asgore are really caring parents, but they just can't deal with each other, so they got divorced and kind of went like, okay, let's co-parent type of thing. So it kind of seems to, like, to me, like, the Holiday family is kind of like an opposite to that, where, like, Carol and Rudy can't deal with each other, but they don't want to divorce because maybe Rudy is like a Stolas figure where he's trying to give them he's trying to give Des and Noelle like a happy family where everything's fine, where everything's great, there's nothing going on. Like, he's trying to maintain the illusion of a happy family where, like I said, like, Carol is a very abusive and just does not care about her kids. And anyway, side tangent. Anyway, that's my thoughts. This is very much I'm 25 minutes into this recording, and like if you could not tell, like, my thoughts are just gonna go everywhere by now. Let me just say now, my thoughts are gonna go everywhere. So yeah, so I feel like Gaster originally came after Carol, but Carol either A, knew about it before, or B, defended herself, because there isn't any evidence to say one way or the other, but Carol somehow talks with Gaster and bargains off Des for her own life and to work with Gaster on this project. And Gaster is just like, all right, fine. And he takes Des and makes her the knight. And then they basically try to make Toriel and Undyne knights as well, to kind of just be like anti-fun gang and trying to cause the roaring. That's the one I most believe, because that's the one that has more evidence, and it also has more things of making sense. Like, it has more ways of stuff lining up and stuff making sense. But I also thought about, like, Des. A lot of fan interpretations of Des is like this adventurous, cool punk girl character who is just like the best thing of the Holiday family. So it would kind of seem to me like Des would either just explore the bunker alone, or like just record a video for themselves or the internet type of thing. Basically, what I'm trying to say is just Des goes into the bunker alone, and Gaster's just like, well, fuck you, and then turns her into the knight. It wouldn't really explain why Carol because it very much feels like Carol knows about the Dark Worlds, the Night, everything like that. So that this route doesn't really explain how Carol would really know everything. Of course, it's not confirmed, but it's very, very much implied. I don't know how Chris is involved in any of it. I don't know if Chris originally somehow like found Gaster and then somehow originally was like on Team Gaster, because Deltarune, like the overarching thing of Deltarune very much feels like Team Gaster versus the Fun Gang. Just because, like, one is trying to cause the roaring and the other one is trying to stop it. And I don't know if Chris was originally just, like, meant to be a double agent for Team Gaster against the Fun Gang, or if Chris was originally on Team Gaster and then went, oh shit, this is not what I wanted, and then through Deltarune kind of realizes that and actually lands on the Fun Gang, or what? Because I don't know, because I and the fandom don't know what Chris promised. And this is also, by the way, I'm recording this all before Chapter 5 comes out. Because I don't know when this is gonna get released, and I don't know when Chapter 5 is gonna get released, but it's near the end of the year, so I'm just saying this now just to cover my ass. But yeah, I just don't know how Chris is involved in anything with this theory. It could be that Chris was the same as Des, and like he was the chosen one for like the dreamer aspect, but then bargained off Toriel, or what? But I don't know. I don't really believe that, because it seems like Chris is very much without the soul and our influence. It seems like Chris is very protective of the ones he loves. So I would very, very highly doubt that Chris would bargain off Toriel. Like I said, so that's why I believe Des is the knight, and how Des became the knight, and stuff like that. Like I said, it very much feels like stuff aligns, but I'm also grasping at straws. I don't really know how it very much makes sense to me, and I'm getting it across the right way, and like how it makes so much sense to me. But so like that's why I think Des is the knight, and how Des became the knight, and everything that I went over. So, and then the other theory that like recently just like popped into my brain because of stuff from chapter 4. So my Ralsei theory very much just it very much just like at the last second before right before I hit record, like everything just like fell into place. I was like, oh, that would be interesting. It's partially because of it partially like is influenced by the Azrael dust theory, and also the Chris what is it called, the Chris losing his hand theory. It's sort of like a marriage between those two. So in chapter 4, when you're getting the egg, it says, and I can't remember it now, stuff like that. So future me will throw it up on screen and correct me when I like if I'm ever wrong, type of thing. In chapter 4, in the egg room, there is a sink, and Chris washes his hands, and there is a gray stuff. There's something gray in between his fingers, and no matter how much he tries to wash it away, it will never go away. And in Mr.BrickAndCo's video about this theory, he kind of just casually throws out that it represents guilt. And also, he mentions in that video there's a lot of hand iconography in Deltarune as a whole. I kind of think what Ralsei is so basically, okay, what I think happened to make Ralsei was Chris cut off Azrael's like hand or part of their arm, something like that. Basically, they cut something so bad that a part of Azrael came off, and that kind of turned into dust. Because if you don't know, in Undertale and Deltarune, when monsters die, I very much cannot speak right now, they turn to dust. So if no one has really, like, there's only one character in Deltarune that has a lost appendage that we know of. Obviously, this could be, like, it could be Azrael, and that's kind of where I'm going with it. Like, we don't know what happened to that arm of Caddy's father, but I would imagine that since the arm is no longer part of the body, it turns to dust. So what I think happened, like, Chris did something to Azrael on accident. Chris feels really bad about it, and kind of just, like, scooped up his brother's hand arm thing. I'm just gonna go with hand and or arm, just so I can say something and just keep going and running with this thought. So Chris, like, scooped up the dust of Azrael's arm and just kind of kept it as a reminder for his guilt. Like, this is what you feel guilty of. You should not feel guilty. And I think that's what Ralsei is, because Ralsei constantly has their arms behind their back. And, like, if you ever are, like, imposing, like, you don't have an arm in, like, theater or just, like, make-believe or stuff like that, you can either, like, put it in your shirt or put it behind your back. So that's kind of what I like, and like I said, like I just very much, right before I hit record, it very much just was like, hey, this is what Ralsei is because of evidence type of thing. I was like, oh, that would make sense. Yeah. It just, I don't really believe it as hard as my Delta, like the Des is the Knight, and this is why Des is the Knight theory that I shared for this video. But if that does become, if we see Azrael and Azrael is, like, has no arm or has no hand, I'm going to believe it even harder. But if we see Azrael just totally fine and has all of his limbs and appendages, I'm gonna be like, alright, that's fine. The mystery of what Ralsei is still in the air. I'm not overtly hurt about it. Like, it just, like I said, it makes some semblance of sense to me, and there's enough evidence because there's not a whole lot of stuff in game. This is mostly just what others have said, and I'm like, oh, that would make sense if it was leading to this. It would make sense to this theory. Yeah. Whatever. I don't know. I'm just recording this now just to get it out of my head because this has been in my head for a while. What if, that thing of what if you didn't have to strike the earth? What if you, struck something else? Has been in my head since chapter 2. And, since we now have the night and all of this, the night is death imagery and, evidence pointing towards it being death, I'm like, I have to talk about this. I have to get this out of my head. Yeah. I'm just gonna say thank you for listening to me ramble on like a madman and grasp at nothing, potentially, but like I said, I was just like, I need to share my Deltarune night theory. It's also me trying to make sense of stuff that just was randomly thrown out and, was interesting to me, and, what ultimately trying to explain is trying to connect dots that possibly are not meant to be connected or just, aren't dots at all. So with all of that out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys liked it, please leave a like, hit subscribe. It would really help me become a big YouTuber star, man. That is eventually what I want to become in life. Ring the bell for notifications for my normal videos. This theory video was very much not my typical type of video. What I typically do is gameplay, like Let's Plays and stuff. Some active playthroughs that I'm still going through are Bending in the Dark Revival, Psychonauts, Marvel Rivals, Minecraft, and Night in the Woods. Some finished playthroughs if you just want to binge an entire playthrough, or if you only have time for a one-off. Some of those are Undertale, Portal, Omori, Broken Age, and Greg's Deadly Draft. So yeah, so with that, I will see you guys in the next issue. See ya!